It's not every day you hear the phrase gully washer. That's kind of interesting. Hey there, it's 3:06. Good to talk to you here on News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, 3:30 from the Heritage Foundation, we'll talk border security with Lora Ries. Remember border security? We don't have that anymore. Ian Pryor will be here at 4 o'clock as we get into a big children's hospital that was hurting the kids. Ian's got the details. Mike Waltz will be with us as well at 5 o'clock, the congressman from Florida. He's a member of the House Armed Services Committee. Vladimir Zelensky visiting with Congress today. And the president of the United States, hat in hand, he wants more money. What is that conversation like right now on Capitol Hill? Congressman Waltz will give us the update. And you can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Man, I tell you, the Biden administration, just so insulting on this issue of our border. They pretend like they're doing something, and of course, it's just a brazen lie. Karien stepped up to the microphone for all of 10, 15 minutes today. It wasn't a very long press conference because it was just scandal after scandal after scandal that she didn't have any good answers for. She pretends like everything's fine, and then she runs out of the room. She didn't even want to take questions from Peter Doocy today. She called on him for half a second, and the moment he asked her to stay on topic, she got all offended and she moved on. I can't even talk to you. This is Doocy today asking about the border and 10,000 people in just, 24, 48 hours?
So what do you call it here at the White House when 10,000 people illegally cross the border in a single day?
So what do you call it, Peter, when GOP puts forth a wait, no, you can't.
Karien?
I'm answering. Okay, we're gonna move
You're
on.
answering
No,
a question with a question? Okay.
no. We're moving on. We're
Karien,
moving.
please.
In the back. Go
Now,
ahead.
you said you were
Go
stopping
ahead,
the
in
flow
back.
at the border.
No.
10,000
I tried to
migrants.
answer, Peter. I
Okay.
tried to answer the question. You stopped me. Let's go. Go ahead.
She's a child. How old is she actually? Isn't she like 50 years old? She seems like a child. She's a child. So he asks a question. She is not answering it. She strays away, just like everybody else in this administration, just like Merrick Garland did yesterday in testimony before the Congress. Doocy says, wait a second, let's stay focused. I just asked you, what do you call it when 10,000 people cross the border in a single day? And she starts trying to shift blame to Republicans. It's an amazing thing, isn't it? She stands up there and she says it's Republicans' fault that our border has collapsed and that waves of humanity are pouring in each day. And what does she mean by that? She means that Republicans haven't joined Democrats in passing a mass amnesty in Congress. That's what she's talking about. It doesn't even make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. There is no, reality has no role in these conversations. She just sees chaos and thinks she can exploit it to advance their agenda. It's getting bad there, folks, on the southern border. The mayor of Eagle Pass, Texas, has declared a state of emergency. Here's CNN's coverage of it.
The mayor of a Texas border city is pleading for help as the members and the numbers of migrant crossings have increased significantly. A source tells CNN nearly 3,000 migrants crossed near the city of Eagle Pass, Texas in just one day. The mayor signed an emergency declaration hoping to get financial help and, frankly, more services.
Yeah, financial help and more services. How about some border security? Why is this all financial help and services? How many of these stupid mayors are going to come forward with their hands out and say, hey, can you print more money? That's the only way out of this. No, it's not, actually. It's to allow the Border Patrol to do their job. It's to stop people from crossing our border. It's to deport illegal immigrants who are in the country. Back when the numbers were something like 9 million illegals in the United States, you had Democrats and Republicans working together. Remember the Gang of Eight process? Trying to figure out, how do we give them all amnesty? If we give them amnesty, then we'll have border security, and then everything will be taken care of. As if we never learned the lessons from the 80s when this very thing happened. That's not how it works. You give amnesty, the government doesn't do border security, and then we have to resolve this problem again a couple decades from now. And how do we resolve it? By granting amnesty. In other words, people keep breaking our laws, and then we keep allowing it. And Joe Biden, despite the words you hear out of the mouth of Biden, Karien, Mayorkas, take your pick, has only accelerated all of this intentionally. Not by accident, completely intentionally. Think about the pattern here for Joe Biden. What has he done throughout his administration? On the very first day of his administration, he suspended deportations. The very first day, he said, we're doing a 100-day suspension of deportations. No deportations at all. That would later be basically extended indefinitely when Mayorkas announced that we will not be deporting anyone who comes into contact with law enforcement who is merely, quote, undocumented. In other words, illegal immigration alone is not a basis for deportation in the United States of America. That's Mayorkas. It wasn't just something they did quietly. He announced it. We're not deporting people if you come here illegally. That was an announcement from the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. So what are people to conclude from all across the planet? Well, that's an easy pass. I can make it right into the country, and there are no consequences for that. Heck, I'll turn myself in. I'll look for a government official. Excuse me, Mr. Border Patrol agent. I'm here. I'd like to stay. Right this way, sir. We've got a holding facility for you. And then we'll put you on a bus. And then we'll send you to a city of your choice. All paid for by taxpayers. Whether it's at the state level or the federal level. Mostly at the federal level. So Biden suspends deportations. Mayorkas says no more deportations at all for anybody who's here illegally. That's not a justification for getting deported. Also, immediately when Biden took office, that was 2021, Biden pushed for legislation, and this is the legislation that we're hearing Karien talk about today, to grant nearly every illegal immigrant in the country amnesty and a path to, that's right, citizenship. You can become a citizen. You broke our laws, you win the prize. It's like a game of capture the flag. You get across, you get to the flag, you win today's game. Sovereignty be damned. This is the fact sheet that was posted on the White House website back on January 20th of 2021. President Biden sends immigration bill to Congress as a part of his commitment to modernize our immigration system. Modernize means instantly create American citizens out of millions of people who are not allowed to be here. That's what he means by modernize. Also, this year alone, the New York Times has reported the following headline: Biden opens a new back door on immigration. In other words, Biden threw open the back door for even more foreign nationals to pour in. This is not an administration that's trying to stop illegal immigration. This is an administration that's accelerating it. Amid a protracted stalemate in Congress over immigration amnesty, President Biden has opened a back door to allow hundreds of thousands of new immigrants into the country, significantly expanding the use of humanitarian parole programs for people escaping war and political turmoil around the world. The measures introduced over the past year to offer refuge to people fleeing Ukraine, Haiti, Latin America, offer immigrants the opportunity to fly to the United States and quickly secure work authorization, provided they have a private sponsor to take responsibility for them. Sure. And what happened with all of that? Remember all the kids who've been pouring into the country? There's a sponsor waiting for them. It turns out they are being put into slave labor. You have kids pouring across our border, being sent off to do hard labor to pay off the debts to the cartels, happening right here in the United States of America. Karien says that's fine. Everything is fine. It's amazing. Here's Karien today saying, look, this is normal. This is a normal pattern. These are just the ebbs and flows of humanity.
In addition to Eagle Pass, El Paso is also seeing a new influx as well. I understand your comments about being a broken immigration system, but the administration also took credit following the end of Title 42 for the drop in border crossing numbers. Is it now taking responsibility for the rise in numbers?
So here, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Gabe. I'm so sorry. Finish your.
Yeah, and then secondly, you mentioned those 800 new troops that are going down to the border. Do you think that'll be enough?
Look, it's on top of what we have done already.
Whatever troops they're sending to the border, that is to process more people in. It's not to stop migration, not to stop illegal migration into America.
In the past 2 years under this administration, look, every year, as you know, Gabe, I know you follow this very closely, U.S. sees ebbs and flows. Of migrants arriving fueled by seasonal trends, as you know, and efforts of smugglers to encourage migration. That is something that we see over and over again. And
we're just powerless to stop it. I mean, look, the Biden administration has created all the conditions that the cartels are exploiting to enrich themselves and kill Americans. That's true. That's true. Biden has blood on his hands because of this. Hundreds of thousands of Americans dying due to the drug overdoses that are the product of the cartel's poison being injected into the country. And we have countless migrants who are dying on the border, people who are illegally immigrating into the country who are dying making the journey. Death and destruction. Just overnight, Wednesday, a 3-year-old child died on Wednesday as his family attempted to cross the Rio Grande and Eagle Pass. 3 years old. According to a spokesperson for the Texas Department of Public Safety, telling ABC News. The agency says the troopers with the Tactical Marine Unit responded to reports that a child had been swept away by the current. When troopers located the child, he was transported to a hospital, but was pronounced dead, officials said. DPS said the family was attempting to cross the river north of the floating marine barrier Texas Governor Greg Abbott had ordered authorities to install to help prevent migrants from crossing. This is only the latest death on the border. We have a lot of these. A woman fell to her death after climbing over the U.S.-Mexico border fence on Friday. I want to say about 2 Fridays ago now, according to U.S. Border Patrol. The woman fell from the wall near Drucker Lane and Siempre Viva Road, the San Diego Police Department said. Her fall took place west of the Tijuana International Airport and near the U.S. Customs and Border Protection's Otay Mesa Port of Entry. That's according to NBC7 San Diego. And this is, I could look this up every day. There's another one. Local news reports out of Texas, Arizona, California, on and on and on. People dying, crossing the border, washing up on shore, falling from the border wall. This is what Biden has created. In March, the Wall Street Journal ran a piece with this headline, quote, "It's like a graveyard. Record numbers of migrants are dying at the U.S.-Mexico border." Dateline, Eagle Pass, Texas. Local officials keep a refrigerated truck to hold the bodies of the migrants who drown in the currents of the Rio Grande while trying to cross the border into the United States. Across the river, families having picnics or walking along the waterfront promenade of Piedras Negras, Mexico, say they sometimes see bodies floating by or bobbing along among the reeds under a bridge. Quote, "We had times when we received 4 or 5 bodies a week," said Hugo Gonzalez, owner of Funerarias Gonzalez in Piedras Negras. "At one point, there were a lot of corpses, and there was nowhere to put them. We just didn't have enough refrigerators at the funeral home," he said. A spike in deaths along the most dangerous stretches of the U.S.-Mexico border reflects the escalating number of migrants seeking to cross into the U.S. from troubled home countries. At the same time, U.S. immigration policies are allowing fewer of them legal entry. This was the claim in March. But again, it doesn't matter how they get here. Legal or illegal, they're staying. That's what happens. Many migrants have turned to human smugglers and WhatsApp messages to help them navigate more lightly patrolled and treacherous sections of the border to enter illegally, U.S. officials said. Now, here's another piece. In case you're wondering, is the Biden administration really trying to open up the border? We now have footage Greg Abbott shared on social media overnight of the Biden administration cutting the razor wire barriers on the Rio Grande. The Biden administration has tasked Border Patrol agents with not securing the border, but instead opening up. There are images now of Border Patrol agents being tasked with using wire cutters to cut the razor wire to allow more people to pour in. That's actually happening. Just watch the video today. And on top of that, you have the story overnight that the Biden administration has now decided to unilaterally grant a form of amnesty, a quasi-amnesty, to hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants now. Hundreds of thousands. The Biden administration has granted protections to hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans amid a surge in illegal immigration at the southern border and stresses on cities across the country, the Department of Homeland Security announced late Wednesday. The program will allow 242,700 an existing temporary protection designation, in addition to roughly 472,000 Venezuelans expected to qualify for the new designation to receive work permits and stay in the United States without fear of removal, DHS said. Venezuelans qualifying for the program must have arrived before July 31st. Sure. How do you prove that? How do you prove the date that they arrived? Come on. It's a total scam. So we have over 500,000 people who were just given a green light overnight by the Biden administration, not by any piece of legislation. There's no legislation involved here. This is Joe Biden just in his old hand being assisted across a piece of paper. This is an executive action. Over 500,000 people. Break our laws, you can stay. In fact, we're going to give you work permits, and you're going to take jobs that Americans could have otherwise had because you're going to be, essentially paid probably a lot less to do the jobs than minimum wage, than prevailing wages. That's it. That's it. So they're it's a great Chris Plantism, but they're not on our side. They're not on our side on this. And all of the, playing pretend, we're trying to get it under control. If only Republicans would help us. What they want is to make it worse. The Republicans who are not helping them, and thank God, are keeping them from passing a legislative amnesty, a law that says tens of millions of illegals are granted amnesty in the United States. That's the state of play right now. I don't mean to bum you out. I can't get over how awful this is. I just can't. We've talked about it over and over through these years. And I've got so many headlines in front of me today. There's no way I'm going to get to all of these about what's just happening on our border. But I will take your calls. I've got Greg here in Lorton calling in. Line 2, Greg, you're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
Hey, Vince, thank you very much for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I love your show, and thank you to all the people behind the scenes who also make it possible. Always got to give a shout out to them.
Amen. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I am very scared. But the fact of the matter is, I really think, unfortunately, it's going to come down to individual citizens going down to the border and unfortunately armed to repel this invasion. The government is not going to do it. And the damage that is going to be caused, we're letting terrorists in. This is just ridiculous. And the elites that are letting this happen, they are so rich, they don't believe that their lives are going to be affected.
Well,
And I have one message for people like that.
Yeah.
He who feeds the alligator gets eaten last. Mm-hmm. That's what happens.
Yeah, look, Greg, you're tapping into I want to address the point that you just made, which is that Americans have to take it upon themselves to enforce their border. At some point, that is actually the logical conclusion to all of this. If the federal government abandons you, you've got to protect yourself. That makes sense. But here's where here's the middle ground. The states need to step up today. The state governments need to step up today. So when Greg Abbott has his razor wire being cut down by the federal government, he's got to step right back in, put it right back up, station troops on the border. He announced today he's sending troops immediately to the border. The state troopers, the Texas National Guard, they're headed back and they're installing more razor wire. That's good. We need to see more of that. The states need to protect their sovereignty because the federal government isn't doing it. More ahead on this subject. Lora Ries joins us from the Heritage Foundation. We'll talk about our border and how to get it back. Well, good afternoon to you. 3:36 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. The breaking news at this moment is that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has arrived in his pajamas at the White House and now walking into the building alongside the Bidens. We'll give you any updates if anything else occurs. Obviously, a big request for money coming moments from now. You can join us today, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. Joining us shortly, Ian Pryor is here at 4 o'clock. We'll talk about a hospital in the United States that really hurt a bunch of children, and details of that are ahead. And then Mike Waltz joins us, the congressman, at 5 o'clock. He's on the House Armed Services Committee, and we'll get his reaction to Zelensky's visit to Washington today. Yeah, the border, it remains in crisis, and overnight, the Biden administration seems to have made it a whole lot worse. They've just granted amnesty now to hundreds of thousands of illegals here in the country, and saying that they can now begin working legally in the country. It seems to me that's only going to be a magnet for more of this chaos, but let's get an expert in here. Lora Ries is a director of Border Security and Immigration at the Heritage Foundation. She's also a former acting DHS Deputy Chief of Staff. Lora, great to have you with us.
Thanks, Vince, for having me on.
Tell me, this decision by the Biden administration to grant all of these hundreds of thousands of work permits to illegal immigrants, that's only, am I wrong? That's only going to make things worse, isn't it?
it is going to make things worse. And this is what the sanctuary city mayors like New York City Mayor Adams has been asking for, and it's just going to make his situation worse. There are 5 things illegal aliens want when they come to the U.S. One of those is to work, in addition to enter and to stay and to send money home and to bring family here. And if you're going to give them work authorization cards and now expedite it, then you're giving them what they really want, which is cover to work here, even though the law says, you're not supposed to hire illegal aliens.
Right.
So this flow will continue because it's no policy change. It's just doubling down.
And you mentioned that they're all going to receive official paperwork from the government saying that they're okay to work here. This is not something that this isn't a law, is it? This is just Joe Biden deciding on his own to grant this status.
Well, there's something in the Immigration Act called temporary protected status. But what that is intended for is for populations who happen to be in the U.S. when something bad happened back home, like a natural disaster or ongoing armed conflict. And what the generally Democrat administrations, although Republican administrations have done this as well, is they just keep extending and expanding this program for lots of countries. Right now, the Biden administration is up to 16 countries that it gives this protection, and there's nothing as permanent as a temporary protected status or a temporary program. So they'll just keep extending this, and they keep moving the date. So if you got here a little bit more recently, the cutoff is end of July, you too can have this temporary quote-unquote lawful cover and a work card.
I mean, and it seems to me that the rationale for granting the so-called temporary protective status has gotten more and more loose through the years. There are all, like political turmoil. Political turmoil is a rationale for TPS, then I deserve TPS if that's the case, because we're experiencing it here.
There's some that still have TPS that go back to 1998 Hurricane Mitch. So yes, this is not serious. But as a default, administrations keep extending it. During the Trump administration, we terminated several of these programs. And then, of course, the left took us to court, and it got tied up in court until the Biden administration came in and said, no, just kidding, we want to extend them. So that's why we're up to 16 countries right now. And on top of that, for Venezuelans, they also get their own mass parole program. So, if you're not already in the U.S. and get TPS, you can be outside the U.S., claim you're Venezuelan, and then be paroled into the U.S. and also given a work card. So, it's good we're being very generous. I'll put it that way.
Yes, and the Biden administration is actively trying to make it easier to get across our border, too. So you have the state of Texas has been assembling razor wire on the border to try and prevent people from even attempting to make the journey. But we see video overnight shared by Governor Greg Abbott of Biden administration officials, Border Patrol agents tasked by the Biden administration, are now cutting down the razor wire and opening it up to allow waves of humanity to come in. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Well, the only similar thing, and again, it was in Texas and during this administration, is when the National Guard put there by Texas turned migrants away, and then the CBP officials went and opened gates for them to come in. We've also seen this, so when the former governor, put up shipping containers to fill gaps in the border wall, the feds came in and sued them and said, no, take those down. Don't you dare secure the border. And the feds also did the same thing when Texas Governor Abbott did it with the floatables. The feds sued. It's tied up in court right now, but I mean, they might as well just say we want the border open because every act says that.
So my impression was that the Constitution requires the federal government to protect the states against invasion. Don't they have a constitutional obligation to help Texas?
Yes, this is an interesting issue, and Governor Abbott, in a letter, declared this to be an invasion, but it hasn't quite come to a head. If Texas were to deport illegal aliens back to Mexico, then the feds would swoop in and sue him for that, perhaps arrest the agents, and then this would be tested in court. This is a novel issue about whether states could deport for invasion. Frankly, at this point, I think it's an issue that needs to be tested.
Yeah, Article 4, Section 4. The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a Republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion. Greg Abbott should test this today. Greg Abbott should start deporting people immediately and see if the Biden administration wants to put this in the court system.
Right. Some will argue, well, when that was written, that was about invasion by armies. But I don't think the founders envisioned what we're seeing today as a scenario to include that in when they were writing the Constitution. So yes, it's a novel issue, but we are to the point now where it needs to be tested and examined.
Let me ask Lora Ries, is it possible to even get our arms around the number of illegal foreign nationals who are now in the country?
Well, we know what CBP's encountered just in this administration, and that's over 7 million illegal aliens. And we know that this administration is not deporting very many at all. So we have to say the vast majority of that 7 million are staying here. And that doesn't even include the 1.6, 1.7 known gotaways that evaded the Border Patrol. Now, the number that used to be cited pre-Biden of illegal aliens here was anywhere from 11 million to 21 million. So tack on maybe another 7 million, and that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, which 20 to 30 million people is a lot in a country of just over 300 million. That if you get up towards that higher end, that's 10% of the country's population. Illegal foreign nationals.
It's another state. It's a whole other state worth of people.
You know, Karien Jean Pierre said today the following. She said, quote, "The president has done everything that he can to deal with this issue." What does that mean?
Well, he's dealing with it, but the way he's dealt with it is to open the border wide open. This is what the left is all in for. They believe in mass migration. They are weaponizing it. They have erased not just our border, but they've erased the line between legal and illegal immigration. They claim it is all lawful, and they want a mass amnesty. In effect, they already have it because they're letting these people stay here and giving them work cards. And if Congress were to give them actual green cards, that's just icing on the cake. But that is what the left is seeking to do, is just pile up the numbers so much to pressure Congress to give these populations green cards. And then, of course, meanwhile, they are trying to get them to vote at city and state level, and even in some cases federal level.
I know that some of these Democrat mayors have raised concerns about their city resources being stretched thin by these illegal foreign nationals, but I do feel like not enough conversation is happening around the actual death that is occurring as a result of this border crisis. We've got reports overnight of a 3-year-old drowning in the Rio Grande, attempting to get into the country. Last week, we had a woman die after she fell from the border wall in California. And you have had countless bodies show up in the water and on the border that basically go unnoticed by most of the press, in addition to, of course, the nearly 100,000 or over 100,000 Americans who died due to drug overdoses, many as a result of the cartels injecting that poison into the country. Lora, how critical is it that Americans be aware of just how much death is associated with this?
Well, Biden has been making a lot of records when it comes to the border, and the number of border deaths and the number of search and rescues our agents have had to carry out are just some of those awful records that Biden has made. And Secretary Mayorkas of Homeland Security keeps saying his policies are safe, orderly, and humane, but they're anything but. They're not humane for Americans who are dying from the fentanyl or from the gang members getting in and killing people, both Americans and migrants. And it's not humane for the migrants who are in the hands of their cartels and getting raped along the way, or drowning, or left abandoned in awful weather conditions. So there are so many grounds that Secretary Mayorkas warrants to be impeached. And the inhumanity is just one of them. And where is he, by the way? He seems to be MIA as the border is seeing, again, record numbers of illegal aliens. I mean, the numbers right now are just crushing. They're up to about almost 10,000 a day again.
In September of 2021, the first year of the Biden administration, Mayorkas announced that the policy of the United States will be to no longer deport people solely because they are, quote, undocumented. If you're an illegal immigrant, so long as you don't commit other crimes, you are not to be deported, said Alejandro Mayorkas. How much has that policy had an impact on the current crisis?
Well, it kind of sums up this administration's view regarding immigration enforcement writ large. But it also contradicts his own memo that he put out. He put out an enforcement memo that says we're going to prioritize spies, terrorists, some aggravated felons, and if you entered illegally after the election of 2020, basically. But clearly, they're not enforcing the law against all these illegal aliens showing up after the election. And they're also turning ICE on its head. Instead of using ICE to find these people, even the most serious criminals, and deport them, they're turning ICE into a agency to give social services to more illegal aliens. This isn't good for Americans. It's not safe. So this is going to blow up.
Yes.
I mean, this administration is running on dumb luck, and their luck's going to run out at some point.
I think you're right. So on this particular issue, I know the fundamental question for all of us is, what's the motivation for this? Why is the Biden administration doing this? I know a lot of people suspect, and I'm among them in terms of like my actual belief, is that they think that in the long run this will be beneficial politically, that somehow by granting mass amnesty, everybody becomes Democrat voters, keeps them in power forever. What do you think the motivation is here?
It is political, and it's about power, and that can come in a number of different ways. It could be letting them vote in state and local elections. It could be letting them vote fraudulently through mail-in ballots, et cetera, all the different ways that election fraud occurs. But it's also about congressional districting. So the left successfully kept the U.S. citizenship question off of the U.S. Census, which means everybody is counted, and those numbers are used to apportion congressional districts, including green card holders, temporary visitors, and illegal aliens. So you have states like California with more congressional districts than they should have if we only use U.S. citizen numbers, and then other states which should have more representation.
Right. So next time we do a census based on all of these illegals flowing into New York City right now, that means New York City is likely to get even more congressmen, Democrat congressmen dedicated to just New York City.
That's right.
Okay. Well, that is one very good answer to this crazy saga. Lora Ries, thank you very much. Good to have you with us today, as always.
Unlawful presence in the United States will alone not be a basis for an immigration enforcement action.
Yeah, they hung up the welcome sign, rolled out the welcome mat for illegal foreign nationals to pour into our country. That was Alejandro Mayorkas back in 2021, saying we won't deport you if you come here illegally. Let's take a phone call. Cole in Stafford now, line 2. Cole, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Coglianese Show.
So my frustration is the Republicans in Congress can do something and actually file impeachment articles on these people, on Christopher Wray, on Mayorkas, and actually minimally you can still do it on the president because they're in the Constitution that says you have to execute the laws faithfully.
Yeah.
And they're not doing it. And passing federal bureaucratic policy does not get to override law. You are in violation of the oath that you swore to honor and defend. These politicians need to stop thinking about the ruling class aristocracy that they're trying to hold power on both sides. Start thinking about the constituency that put them there in the first place.
That's exactly right. And this is why I'm trying to emphasize this point about all this death. You have hundreds of thousands of people dying, due to this border crisis. At what point do you say that high crimes and misdemeanors have been committed here? You ignore the law. You say, I'm not going to enforce it. I'm not going to deport people who are here illegally. You aid and abet the cartels. You give federal taxpayer money to organizations that are busing people deep into our country. And we're supposed to look at that and say that's all on the up and up? There's no high crimes and misdemeanors here? Republicans need to find the testicular freaking fortitude to go after these guys, impeach them now, start with Mayorkas, and don't stop until you are done with the entire phone book of Biden administration officials. And I don't care what moderate state you come from or district, you don't want your constituents dying, do you? Because that's what's happening right now.